Welcome, CHOPMASTER Jay.
What's up now?
Great to see you. So born and raised in Berkeley, tell us about those early days getting the music bug, what that whole community was like that, grew what you got.
Growing up in the Bay, it's home of Sly Stone, Sly and the Family Stone, the Grateful Dead, Tower Power, the first R&B hit with Hand Jive with my man Johnny Otis. Bay Area has a real rich history of music and art, and I was just glad and happy to be there and be influenced by it all.
So it's all you knew, but looking back on it, it was an incredible, rich musical environment. The record stores, the live music in the cafes, and
all that
shows on the theaters.
Stuff like I can't remember.
You got Bill Graham for
Bill Graham, one of the greatest promoters of all time.
Yeah, man.
Later in my life, I got a chance to play the Fillmore and things of that nature with my band Big Brother Soul. But growing up and doing all the things that we did, I grew up in the Berkeley music program at the city of Berkeley, not Berkeley Jazz School in Boston, not the music school in Boston, but the city of Berkeley. And our music program played with everybody from Duke Ellington to Donald Byrd to Dick Gregory to all kind of folks. As a child, I got to experience all of that. Yeah, playing the drums. I'm a drummer. I grew up playing drums.
So that's what the first instrument was? You gravitated to the drums?
Drums.
And what was it about the drums that drew you in?
It was the whole, locking down the beat, being in control of the tempo, being basically in control of the song and the performance as it goes. Yeah. Amazing.
So talk about the first neighborhood groups, the garage bands.
I had my own band I had my own band. I've had my own band since I was 9 years old. It was the Jimmy Dwight All Stars, and one of the first jams we played at good talent shows was, I had my instrumentation was myself on drums, a saxophonist, a trombonist, and a guitarist, and we were up there playing. I Got Ants in My Pants on the Need to Dance by James Brown. So, we've been rocking talent shows for forever, all the way to the arenas and all over the world, baby.
So yeah, always a rich, funk and soul, climate out there. So obviously you saw the Parliaments and the Funkadelics and the Sly and the Family Stones and all that great Ohio players, everybody.
You know who were one of the greatest bands to actually grace the stages in Oakland back in the day? I wasn't around at the time, but I felt the energy and I knew of them. We're like the Escovedo family. Not just Sheila E. and the stuff that she did with Prince. I'm talking about her daddy and uncles.
Yeah.
They were one
of the
family. They were one of the greatest bands and one of the greatest performing bands that played at several of the nightclubs through Oakland in the late 50s and early 60s in Oakland and the Bay Area. But to be able to come up in Berkeley with the university right there and all the female, the women's liberation movement, the Black Panther Party movement, and the free speech movement all happening and within like 1 year of each other in 1 mile radius right there with the university. As a kid growing up, you felt all of that, and it was a blessing, true blessing.
So how did it lead to teaming up with Shock G?
Shock G is someone who, at the end of the day with me, I grew up playing jazz and bebop. And a lot of the friends that I grew up with playing music, being in R&B bands, would be people like Eddie Minifield, Eddie M, Miko, Michael Weaver, Bonnie Boyer, and a lot of other musicians who had gone on to play with Prince during Prince's heyday in Purple Rain and the Sheila E. thing and the Glamorous Life and all that stuff. So I kind of had gotten a little depressed because a lot of my friends had gone on to do what they were doing on that level, and I was a big Prince fan. So I kind of had missed that boat of playing with that, and so I figured that I better go in and get me some electronic instrumentation and learn how to get into the 20th century, as it were, in terms of drum machines, sequencers, samplers. And so I went into Music Unlimited in San Leandro and met this down on his luck grifter, Shock G, posing as a keyboard salesman in Music Unlimited in San Leandro. And so, in exchange for him selling me all this gear and doing all that stuff, he was supposed to come over and show me how to use the gear. And with him coming over and showing me how to use the gear, we ended up doing some things and some of the things that he was bringing to the table I thought were really interesting, because he was from New York by way of Tampa Bay, Florida, and had come out and was very much a hip hop guy who was a musician. So we locked in on the musician thing, and we kind of locked in on the idea of being a band, except instead of him being a singer, he would be rapping. And so that's kind of what locked me in with him, and us collaborating and getting down and putting down the underground.
Sure. Now Kenny K, that was also his friend from Tampa?
Kenny K was a homie of his from Tampa that was like a radio DJ there at one of the community stations, you know, and the college stations there. I mean, especially with hip hop, what was beautiful about hip hop and the whole independent thing is that you weren't going through the mainstream radio doors. You were going through community radio and college radio. You're kind of backdooring your art. And Kenny K was a radio personality that Shock had hooked up with from Tampa Bay that he eventually ended up bringing to Oakland. Kenny K, when he passed away some years back, I don't know, maybe 15 years ago, maybe almost 20 years ago, as it were, he was a real good brother, pro-black brother, into righteousness and positivity. He was a good dude.
Okay, great. So bring us through the evolution, how the group grew. I know you eventually released the Underwater Rhymes through Macola down here. It was the, the pressing plant that NWA and Ice-T and everybody came through.
Everybody got that foot in their ass in the way of growing and coming up to the industry. You know, basically what happened is that a good friend of mine that came up through that Berkeley music program was Rodney Franklin, a jazz artist over at Columbia Records. And Rodney Franklin's road tour manager back in the day and friend was a guy named Atron Gregory. Atron Gregory was a guy at the time doing his thing with Jerry Heller and NWA at the time as a road manager for them. So he was up on the whole Ruthless thing and how to try to launch an independent label, as well as being a road manager and a tour manager. Rodney Franklin and Atron had a production company called Golden Eagle Productions. I signed with, because Rodney was someone I know since I was 5 years old, and we basically went on to, you know, to do a thing where Rodney felt his boy Atron was inclined to do this hip hop thing. So, you know, we went on and we did a deal with Golden Eagle Productions to allow them to be the production company that we put a record out through. And our first 12-inch single, we took it and went over to Macola. And it was oddly enough that, you know, as much as the record did, I took the record. I took it when it was a cassette, before it was a 12-inch. I was a guy who went around to all the radio stations and got it played at community and college radio, as well as I took it over to KMEL, the power station in the Bay, where they used to have Kiss It or Diss It that would come on in the evening. And because that's when they primarily played hip-hop, was in the evening after 7 p.m. And, you know, and they kissed it, they loved it. And because of it, we went into rotation at KMEL. And from that point on, you know, we went on to start opening up for people like Tone Loc and Rob Bass and Easy Rock, DJ Easy Rock, and rest in peace. And you know, and those kind of national groups, we would open up for the radio stations promotional shows that they would be doing.
Like the Power 106, the Powerhouse, and all that.
But we're talking 1989, 88, 89. You know, and it was fun. It was hot.
Two Live Crew and stuff like that.
Two Live Crew. Wow, they were, God, were they something else. You know, I can remember doing a show with Two Live Crew where we were down south, and the police warned, the sheriff's department warned them if they cursed on stage, they were taking them to jail. So Luke at that point would go, they're not going to let us rap the song tonight, so instead we're going to let you rap it. So here's 20,000 screaming kids out there, and they're rapping all of the lyrics of the songs. He would just say the hooks and say something, hold the mic up, and they would do it, and police couldn't do nothing about it. You couldn't arrest 20,000 kids. He was brilliant, Luther Campbell, brilliant.
Amazing stuff. So obviously this was, you know, MTV was taking off. Yo MTV Raps started out. Tell us how it eventually came to be the Tommy Boy deal.
Well, you know, we had a good friend. I had a friend. I used to work at Leopold's Records in Berkeley. Great record store, one of the non-chain record stores at the time. And a good friend, Daria Kelly, who was a 12-inch buyer for the record store, used to send the West Coast 12 inches because things were very segregated, meaning not in race, but in terms of East Coast.
Yeah, the sound.
East Coast, yeah, and West Coast was exclusive to their rap stuff. And she would take the West Coast 12 inches that she liked and send them to New York to her friend who was the East Coast 12-inch buyer for a record store. But it also happened that her friend also was doing an internship at Tommy Boy. Mm-hmm. And she brought our 12-inch over to Tommy Boy. Tommy Boy and Dante Ross and De La Soul and those cats, they loved our song, Prince Paul. They liked our underwater rhymes and all that to the point to where they went on in and did Me, Myself, and I. And from what I understand, they were kind of inspired by some underwater rhymes, which was a little Chameleon, Herbie Hancock, and Aqua Boogie by George Clinton.
Of course.
Yeah.
So it's you guys were automatically East Coast and West Coast, and
yeah, we were the first actually to be a West Coast act signed by an East Coast label. That was a big deal because East Coast wasn't loving no West Coast shit, and West Coast didn't give a shit because West Coast was maintaining their independence by having to sell their stuff out of the trunk of their car, having to sell their stuff through smaller distributors that would distribute regionally because East Coast really wasn't buying West Coast hip hop. They weren't really buying Too Short.
Yeah.
And even Hammer and those other people at that time.
Yeah, they were originators. They tried to.
Exactly. And they were trying to keep the exclusivity about their shit over the East Coast, but then here comes Easy and Ice Cube and NWA and Dre and those cats, and they blew the shit out the water. It was like, East Coast may have invented hip hop and doing that, but the West Coast mastered on how to make the money about the shit initially, because most of the cats out of the East Coast were signed to labels,
right?
When West Coast cats really were making that shit themselves and selling it themselves, dealing with small distributors but making the lion's share of the money. Yeah,
like a Luke Campbell.
Pressing
and shipping and
he was something else. But more even like all the cats out of the Bay, like whether it be E40 and the Click, all those different cats up out of Vallejo, all those different dudes, Sibo, Mac Dre,
Too Short,
Too Short, and all those cats would primarily be putting this stuff out and selling a lot. Short is kind of like the pioneer and the shit up out the West, who really did go on to sell a lot of records before most.
Yeah.
But he's been around forever. But as it evolved, it still never was a thing where West Coast rappers were really being signed and hooked up that way. And so they've always maintained independence out of necessity. And with, people like somebody like a Sibo, who, and the West Coast, in the Bay Area and stuff, really influenced the shit out of down south and the Southern hip hop movement and the whole idea of the independent, maintaining independence. So once again, the West Coast did pioneer making the lion's share out of hip hop.
They talk about making Sex Packets, how long the album took, where the songs came from,
biochemically,
all that.
Biochemically compacted sexual affection, sex and appeal came out of the whole concept and the idea of it's when AIDS started to be taken seriously within the black community. It really got taken seriously when Magic Johnson announced he was HIV positive. But before then, a couple of years before then, people were really starting to acknowledge that AIDS was real. And so us, out of being, cats that were out clubbing and doing our thing and having fun, decided that maybe it would be a good idea to create this pill that you could basically take and have a simulated sexual experience and an orgasm from just taking a pill. And we were kind of ahead of our time with that, as it pertains to just the whole idea of, being more in control of your. We kind of took the ecstasy and took the ecstasy one step further, and like I said, maintain your own orgasm with this pill. The album itself, Sex Packets, took actually 35 days to make. It didn't take long at all. We did that album for like $12,000.
So you had the songs written?
No, we just kind of knocked them out. Bing. Shock is brilliant. In the studio, Shock is a brilliant cat. He is very much a talent, and and he got down and did his thing, and we worked together and got it all done. It was very much a team effort by a lot of other people. A lot of times the creative folks think that they're the only thing that matters in getting a creative project done, but we all know now that it takes a lot of folks, all the way to the promotion people, the marketing people, everyone. And we were blessed to be over at Tommy Boy because they were this international branded dance hip-hop label that had built their brand solidly internationally. So they were able to put things through that pipeline, and we were one of the fortunate ones to come through there, and we had good shit. Yeah.
So anything you could tell us about, the individual songs, Do What You Like, or
Do What You Like was our
Dance?
party anthem. It was all about, anarchy and just having fun. It was
Was that the first single?
That was our first single that sold pretty well over there and did very well, and it was really a 12-inch deal that we had initially. And after they saw that we did well with that in the video and how it kind of caught on and had its own legs, it basically ended up leading to our deal where we had the album deal. And it was a thing where they felt as though we were a group, and we even some of us that were in the group thought it was a group. Later to find that Shock really felt it was just him. And, and egos and things it ain't nothing new. But the fact of the matter is that we definitely went on to, make things pop as a band and being a hip-hop band, and we were into dressing outrageous and bringing personality and character and doing what we like as a group, opposed to trying to follow some of the trends and, and getting stuck in that world.
Well, obviously when things get popular and the magnifying glass and the pressure cooker happens, if you don't have all your business in line, it's harder to negotiate it when everybody's heads are
when everybody's gone.
Yeah, it's like
and they get the confirmation that they thought that they were the shit.
Everybody's got different attorneys and everything at that point. I mean,
it was stupid.
A whole lot harder.
Yeah, it was dumb because at the end of the day, people, whether artists realize it or not, you have more appeal as a group than you have as a solo act, whether people realize it or not, because people end up liking individuals in the group. People like different people in the group. If you're the Beatles, John had his fans, Paul had his fans, George had his fans, and oddly enough, Ringo had his fans. And collectively, it was huger than anything they could have done independently, even though they're the biggest thing in the world. But the idea of it all is that, having the idea of being a group, being a band, being something different, was very appealing to people, and it's just a shame that we couldn't hold on to that and maintain that. Shock's gone on to do Digital Underground for some years, and they continue to do stuff, but it never really stayed where it was when we were doing things together, because as much as you may or may not write or collaborate on all the songs, there's an energy that people bring together to make stuff work, and that energy and that synergy is what makes people, you can feel that. People can feel that.
Sure. So was the Humpty Hump character just one idea and it kind of got overblown because of the Humpty Dance?
Yeah, the Humpty Hump character was just a character that we basically were trying to, we went to a party store one day, bought a bunch of stuff, took a bunch of photos. That particular character looked funny. Shock had different characters that he played. He was MC Blowfish, he was the Piano Man, he was Humpty Hump, he was Shock G, and Tommy Boy at that time wanted to do individual records because he was almost kind of like suffering from the Flip Wilson Geraldine thing complex, where Flip Wilson said as soon as Geraldine got bigger than him, then he was going to put Geraldine to bed. And so that's kind of what happened even like with Shock doing Humpty, even though you're looking to see Humpty in a brand new Foot Locker commercial with Damon Lillard, the basketball player, as basically a rejected 90s icon is what Humpty plays in that commercial. It's cute but sad at the same time.
Yeah. Well, like you say, with the success of the Humpty Dance, people that didn't know the band, they thought every song had Humpty out front. It was like
and that would be fine. We love the idea of the notoriety and the stuff. I mean, Humpty was a character that Shock could, because Shock himself is a quiet, low-key kind of a dude, and Humpty got to come alive, and he got to come out of himself, or go into himself, or whatever he was doing with himself. The idea of Humpty Hump was a character that people really, really liked. I mean, come on, it was like, it's kind of like an old vaudevillian character, rapping, and
sure.
And everybody loves that. I mean, you look up his Groucho Marx, in black skin.
But then logistically, you had to figure out had to see both of them on the same stage. Had to see both of them in the same.
Well, we
picture.
had that going, yeah. The whole idea of it being Shock and Humpty and being different things. There was a lot of cool stuff going on there in the circus, as it were. You know, I've always felt as though I was the P.T. Barnum of it all, because at the end of the day, you know, us working together, there are a lot of times that people, you know, may or may not appreciate, like I said, all the other things that people do to make things happen. And so, you know, I did work together with Money B, Fuse, and eventually Tupac, who came in. Tupac was someone that, while we had the Do What You Like single out and was circulating on Yo MTV Raps, Layla, who worked over at a teenage nightclub in Santa Rosa, where JJ Fad used to perform a lot, and Atron was the tour manager for JJ Fad at the time. So he and Layla became friends, and she introduced a group she had, Strictly Dope, to Atron, and asked if his guys, meaning us, could do anything for them. Could we work with them or something? So, you know, Tupac at that point went over to, we were doing the Humpty Dance, Starlight Studios in Richmond. You know, he auditioned, and Shock was like, yeah, you good, you tight, but I can't do it. Shock was busy mixing the Humpty Dance and putting the final touches on the Sex Packets album, which we wanted to get out and doing all that, so we really couldn't look at doing other things. So at that particular point, I wasn't as busy doing anything with the records, so I took them on, went in the studio, cut some demos and things of that nature, and through that was able to harness Tupac's energy. Him being able to come to the band house and watching us do interviews and feeling the energy of a group on the come and getting ready to be successful really turned him on. And he would always pull me to the side and go, look, this is cool, Chop, but what can I do to help so that I can get put on? He was obvious that he had a goal to achieve, and
wasn't meant to be a backing member.
It wasn't meant to be a backing member, and wasn't meant to be necessarily a band member with the group that he was doing at the time. He was on a mission, and you know, so when we got back from a European tour, we came back, and Tupac and Strictly Dope had broken up, and we took Tupac with us out as the other member dancing in the Humpty Dance to try to create the same symmetry as we did in the video, as well as him being a roadie, a prop guy, because we used to use a lot of props on stage, and a dancer. And as dope as he was, because the Tupac that everybody knows, he was that dope then, but he was able and was down to check himself, put his ego in check, and work to get to where he wanted to go. He didn't just look to be put on because he was talented, like so many people do. They just think that they feel entitled, and he didn't ever feel entitled. He was down to work to get to the next point. And
he was ambitious, aggressive, but he was still humble.
He was ambitious, aggressive, and knew when to humble himself.
Right.
Yeah. But most certainly,
if you burn the bridge, there's no way to get back over it.
Exactly. And you know, the idea of it all is that what I very much like is, like I said, he wasn't this guy that felt entitled, and he wasn't looking for instant gratification. He wanted to work and get to that point, and he did so.
Okay. So growing up in the family that he did, he knew that nothing was going to be handed to him. He had to grow and build. Well, talk about the early recordings, you know, Static, you got the book, you got all that. Talk about working with him and when you realized, you know, what this guy could become.
Well, you know, working with him and the group that he worked with, Ray Love, who was a talented cat, I believe he's a descendant of Cap Calloway, and the kid Dizzy, the DJ. And they had a whole crew in Marin County. It wasn't just those three, but they were like the three that I worked with and met. There was also Gabe from 5150, who was a producer, programmer dude. And you could tell right off the bat that Tupac was he had this personality. He was definitely more charismatic. Instant, as soon as you would meet him. Ray Love, those guys were talented. They're very talented. But Pac was the squeaky wheel to get the oil. And he knew that. And, so we started working on songs, and at that time, the shit that was hot was NWA. I know Pac was a big MC Ren fan of NWA. And then also BDP and Public Enemy. So the whole pro-black thing was hot as well. And that was the conscious thing that they brought as Strictly Dope. The songs that we worked with, that I had worked on them with, Panther Power, Let Knowledge Drop, Never Be Beat, some of these earlier recordings are truly who Pac really, really, really is. To hear him being compared and called a gangster rap and all shit really a lot of times irritates the shit out of me because he's never been that. He's a socialist cat, and he definitely was about rapping about socialist stuff, even though it became a lot more encrypted to look this way, to fit into. It's almost kind of like you had to put this kind of suit on just for people to even hear you, is what he was doing. But for people who weren't really listening, just put him in a box and said he was a gangster rapper. He was not a gangster rapper. He was a socialist cat who rapped about some righteous shit and some positivity and some unity. And you just have to be able to hear it. And his biggest songs are, you know, through his biggest songs are, Brenda's Got a Baby, Keep Your Head Up, Dear Mama, these anthems that, that really ring true to what he was really all about.